watching CBS 42 College Football Saturday pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Well, just in case you wanted to see visual confirmation of Nick Saban coaching on the sidelines officially for the Crimson Tide, we are moments away from giving it to you. This is a live look at the Walk of Champions at Bryant-Denny Stadium. We hear the sirens. It is only a matter of time before Nick Saban leads his team into the biggest game of the year with number 2 Alabama and number 3 Georgia. Welcome into the pregame show. Chris Brees, Drew Carter, we have you until 6:30 leading up to network coverage of CBS 7 o'clock Alabama and Georgia. Everybody breathing a sigh of relief no matter what was going to happen with Saban's positive negative test. But here we are, and we have so much to talk about. Saban, COVID, on the field. Oh, yeah, they got to win a football game, too.
Chris, I think when Nick Saban walks off that bus, might be the most exciting moment for Alabama football since, what, 2nd and 26, maybe? I mean, they are going to be so juiced up in Tuscaloosa at Walk of Champions. I'm so excited to see that scene, and it looks like they're coming in any minute now.
Yeah, so Nick Saban going to lead this team off the bus. You recall on Wednesday afternoon was the big shock everybody got. Nick Saban said he left the facility at Alabama at 2 o'clock after one positive test. He went home and took a PCR test, which was going to confirm that he actually had COVID-19. That was positive. That's why everybody was saying, okay, this is real. Nick Saban has COVID-19. But then we turn around to Thursday. It turns out that Nick Saban tested Thursday negative, which began the cycle of Nick Saban having a false positive. He tested again on Friday. He was also negative, tested again on Saturday. That's where he got the 3 negative tests in a row. And per the SEC protocol, he was cleared to coach. And here is the image we all wanted to see. Nick Saban, he is ready.
I think he's actually out a little bit farther than he normally is from the rest of the team, Chris. Maybe
Better safe than sorry.
Yeah, keeping that socially distanced. But, I mean, how cool is that? You're right. Just 3 days ago on Wednesday, we heard that he had tested positive. It felt like the sky was falling here in Alabama because ever since this began, Chris, we've been hearing 10-day quarantine or 14-day quarantine, depending on whether you tested positive or were in contact with someone who did. To think that he could turn around and then coach a few days later in the biggest game of the season is mind-boggling. And now here he is ready to lead the team onto the field. It's just incredible.
People were thinking, oh, he's going to be out through the Tennessee game next week. What are they going to do for the next 2 weeks? He said he was coaching from Zoom at home. He was not with the team from Wednesday to Friday. They all said they didn't miss a beat, but now it does not matter because Nick Saban's there. He's the calming presence, and whoever you talk to, whenever a sideline wants to have a panic moment, it's the head coach who reels them all in. And Saban's probably been better than anybody. No matter how bad things are going on the field, you calm them down, you make adjustments, and that's probably the reason why, number one, they are so happy to have him back tonight.
Right, and Chris, think about the Alabama defense, which has been much maligned this year, coming off that game where they gave up 48 at Ole Miss. Ole Miss, by the way, hasn't scored as far as we know against Arkansas today.
20-0.
So the Alabama defense looked awful last week. I know he doesn't call the plays on offense or defense technically. Some coaches are a little more hands-on in terms of play calling, but you need him, like you said, to calm everything down on the sideline, especially defensively.
And that Ole Miss defensive game was the storyline heading into this week before Wednesday afternoon. They may have had just another cool moment there walking up the Walk of Champions. Less fans there, obviously, because they're trying to take everybody back, keep them all back. This is a brand new Walk of Champions, by the way, at Bryant-Denny Stadium. But, yeah, that Ole Miss game was the storyline about this defense. Now we've kind of gotten in this Nick Saban jumbled mess of 3.5 days of COVID positive. We have to reel ourselves back now and realize that Alabama has a football game to win now because so much talk of Nick Saban, him being on the sidelines. To the team, it didn't matter. For us, it did. Now it's, hey, they got to go out against a team who's just as good as them on paper and win the game now.
Yeah, and to think about how they would have beaten Georgia without that man you see on the screen right now, it would have been so difficult because I think it's easy to keep coming back to this. If you're trying to predict who's going to win this game, well, Alabama's got Mac Jones and now Nick Saban against Kirby Smart and Stetson Bennett IV for Georgia. That could be the difference in this game. So Alabama has that massive edge with Saban back on the sideline.
Everybody loves the stat, 20-0 against former assistants. But you got to realize, Kirby Smart is by far the one assistant who has come very close to beating Nick Saban. 2018, the SEC title. You can't forget 2017, Tua, and 26. The journey that Saban has had to get here to be negative for COVID, what a wild week it was. Wednesday, it was all doom and gloom. We're wondering if he was sick, but the key was he was asymptomatic. And that is why this entire process was able to start from the beginning on Wednesday and go to him tonight being cleared to coach. First initial test positive Wednesday. Everybody's freaking out.
Right, and like I said, it seemed like the sky was falling, but the key, Chris, is that he was asymptomatic. And for a guy who turned 69 in a couple of weeks, it seems like that's kind of rare.
So back-to-back negative tests Thursday and Friday, and then on Saturday, the third negative test this morning. This was all through the appointed SEC lab, keep in mind. And just to be safe, out of abundance of caution, he took 2 extra tests from an outside lab. They were also negative. So Nick Saban had 5 negative tests in 3 days.
In a 3-day span. It's pretty wild to think about that. It's really only the type of medical treatment a star player would get if they're trying to come back from a serious injury. But here you see Nick Saban ready to lead the team onto the field against Georgia as we look at some old video of him. But Nick Saban being able to coach this game for Alabama, we know it's going to be huge. And we talked about it. He's been asymptomatic all week long throughout this entire process. And the one constant has been Nick Saban in good spirits.
Something really must be bad wrong. As much as I look forward to these Wednesday press conferences, for me not to be there with you today.
Nick Saban was his typical jovial self Wednesday night. He held that press conference from his home in Tuscaloosa a few hours after he learned he tested positive for COVID-19.
I feel fine. I felt fine. I was very surprised, by this.
That continued Thursday when he appeared on the Nick Saban Show.
How you feeling? You doing okay?
Doing great. I don't have any symptoms. I don't have a fever. They do all those oxygen tests and all that stuff, and everything's normal. So I feel great. Don't have any problems.
But the coach is still working from home, like a lot of us have for the past few months.
It's really been tough for me. I said, I'm getting beat up on both ends. I said, when I come there, I can raise hell with you guys. And now I'm here with Miss Terry, and she's raising hell with me. So I'm losing out on both ends.
There are some benefits to coaching practice via Zoom.
You got the big picture. You can kind of see a lot more, and you see a lot more because you're seeing the big picture rather than specific things. So it was a little interesting, and I guess that's why Coach Brian always stood up in that tower.
Yeah, definitely.
We talked with a man who hosts the Nick Saban Show, Eli Gold, and I asked him about the things Saban called his #1 concern this week.
How do you think the team's focus is going to be with everything that's happening around the program?
The focus will be just fine. Especially since the coach is asymptomatic, so there's not a worry per se. Up, down. The worry is go out and beat the #3 team in America. This game is huge, and it will be. But as far as the guys being distracted or anything like that, I don't see it at all. They'll be ready to play football come Saturday night.
Really, I think the first glimmer of hope for Alabama fans there, Chris, was that Wednesday press conference. It was a few hours after we learned that Saban tested positive, and he said he felt fine. He was joking around at the start and the end of that press conference. Then you started thinking, maybe this guy can coach Saturday.
Yeah, and they're going to need it because this defense has been so maligned. You got to realize that Georgia is tops in the SEC in defense. The 3 teams that Alabama has already played, they've been lights out on offense. 14th, 12th, and 8th in total defense. Georgia is second. They are by far the toughest test Alabama will face all year long, and we're expecting both coaches to have their masks on tonight because the SEC announced a hefty fine as of yesterday for teams who do not abide by COVID-19 protocols, like coaches wearing masks. It will start at $100,000. We've already seen Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Ole Miss fined $100,000, and they've played 2 of those 3 teams already. And very important to note that breaking news moments ago, Florida's Dan Mullen has also tested positive for COVID-19. The Gators season right now, of course, put on hold for right now. They are hoping that they can get back on the field next week. There was plenty to talk about across the SEC, including Auburn and South Carolina earlier today. And this entire thing was about Bo Nix running for his life.
Yeah, Bo Nix getting no help from the offensive line, Chris. The stats look ugly for Nix, but if you watch the game, you realize he had no time to move or throw.
No, it was all about the interceptions for Bo and the subsequent touchdowns after it for South Carolina. That pick led to a score, and now right after that, a second one in a row.
Now, that time, though, you really can't blame the offensive line. The throw was behind Williams. Nix had all day to throw. That's your best receiver. He's got to step. You've got to make that pass.
South Carolina capitalized 2 times in a row, but Auburn still had a lead, and you see Bo Nix and Seth Williams, you do not want to see that.
No, I mean, that's your quarterback and your best receiver, and if Williams is upset on the sideline, you don't think Bo's going to go back to him. We didn't hear from him for the rest of the game.
You knew things were bad. Seth was not touching the ball, and South Carolina started scoring touchdowns. 3 picks, 3 South Carolina touchdowns right after it.
You just put your defense in an impossible spot, Chris, and the defense was great last year. They carried this team. You lose so much from that defense, you can't do it.
With all that said, Auburn had a chance to win, but this intentional grounding looks so familiar. We have flashbacks of last week. That was the second to last play of the game. Here was the final play of the game as we go to the scoreboard here. Final, South Carolina 30, Auburn 22. A game that was very, very ugly for Gus Malzahn and his offense, who really wants to get back on track.
Yeah, and you got to think, is he maybe thinking about taking that playbook back here from Chad Morris? But so far, Auburn's offense has not looked good at all.
Could be just game 4 not going through spring. I don't know. But, you know, if you look at the stat sheet, we wanted to be balanced. And for the most part, we were. I think we had, 200 yards rushing, 9 yards rushing, 272. I thought we did very good on third downs in the first half. I think we were 1 of 5 or 6 in the second half. You know, but you got to give them credit, and we didn't. You know, I think the turnovers were big.
So Malzahn, his offense, it's same story, different week, and now we're getting to a point in the season where can you salvage something? Because 4 weeks in, your SEC title hopes are gone. Right. Alabama's not going to lose 2 times. Even if they do lose to you, they have to lose somewhere else, which is probably not going to happen unless Georgia beats them tonight. The turnovers killed them. You look at the stats, and Auburn was the better team. It was almost 2-1 in yards. You have 3 turnovers. That made all the difference, and South Carolina capitalized when that was the only thing that mattered.
All right, and Chris, we were talking about this as we were watching that game. If there's anyone you don't expect to make careless turnovers or maybe head-scratching plays, it's Bo Nix, who's a coach's son, whose dad started at Auburn. And like you said, Chris, I actually think for the balance of this game, he was decent, but it's the 3 picks that kill Auburn in the end. We saw how many points South Carolina scored directly from those turnovers. That was the death knell for Auburn in this game.
Just when Auburn thought things were bad against Arkansas last week, they have to move on and try to salvage some type of a season in the SEC, as weird as 2020 has been. You know, 2020 has been pretty good for UAB so far in Conference USA. They are undefeated in the conference. In comes Western Kentucky today into Legion Field. We know all about that win streak for UAB, and they put it to the test early.
Yeah, Western Kentucky came in, and the Hilltoppers had a little punch for the Blazers, but you know they responded.
Yeah, they were up 7-3, but UAB said enough of that. Spencer Brown got going 2 yards. He's the all-time leading rusher at UAB. They're up 10-7. And then how about Dwayne McBride? He got a little action in there tonight, 17-7.
A little bit of a 3-headed dragon in the backfield for UAB, you might say. Obviously, Brown's the headliner, but they've got plenty of guys who can score on the ground. Pretty good guy through the air as well. That's Bryson Lucero, their quarterback.
And you love Austin Watkins.
Yeah,
you love
Austin
that guy.
Watkins. Hey, that's my guy. We did a feature on him last year. He's such a good dude. He's such a good receiver. I think he can play on Sundays.
37-14. UAB had no problems getting the victory today. McBride led everybody in rushing, 10 carries, 131 yards. Lucero was great too, and Bill Clark, just casual ho-hum, keep winning games.
You know, this was a big one for us. You know, obviously, it means a little more when somebody beats you the year before, so it was pretty special. And you know, I've been giving them credit. They came in, had a new quarterback, and did a few things different. But you know, just really proud of our effort, our energy. We had a really good week of practice.
Jacksonville State coach John Gross did not make the trip to North Alabama. He's recovering from COVID-19 in Jacksonville there. And it showed early on that North Alabama maybe was the team with the momentum early on because they took a lead early.
Yeah, you got to think for JSU, a team that's only playing 4 games this year, they'd come out ready to rumble, and they sort of picked it up later in the game.
Zarek Cooper, you know where he came from, Drew.
Clemson. Yeah, Zarek Cooper, shout out.
You learn something new every day. And Cooper had a lot of small gains, but they were working well because they were touchdowns. That's all that mattered, and Jacksonville State ran the ball at will on North Alabama. They got the victory 24-17. They have one more game in the fall before they will play their OVC spring season starting on February 20th. All right, more to get to on college football Saturday. The Walk of Champions is just finishing up at Alabama. We are less than 2 hours from kickoff. The pregame show rolls on after this.
watching CBS 42 College Football Saturday pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Here in Birmingham, Samford is in week number 2 of their fall practice. They're calling it spring ball because the FCS is planning on doing a winter-spring season. And with us now, as promised, every week, Chris Hatcher from Samford, head coach. Last week, we were standing right here. You said you wanted to see a little more passion, a little more, intensity, and not showing so rustiness. What was that like this week?
I thought we got a lot better. I really did. The flow of practice was a lot crisper. Having a 10-month layoff, of course, week 1 it showed. This week's been a lot better. We've gotten some really good work. We're getting some awesome work with our younger players that, like I said a couple weeks ago, that may not have been ready to play if they came in this summer, but hopefully come the spring season, they'll be ready to give us some quality snaps. So it's really been good. Not a lot of pressure. Our guys have had a lot of fun, even though it is a lot different practicing when a lot of teams are still playing.
I know you want to be demanding, but you want to be fair. So what's the fine line of expecting something from these guys who haven't practiced in 10 months and actually having compassion and saying, okay, I get it, we got to take our time on this?
Well, I think every spring, even though we are in the fall, there's a learning curve that's involved with everybody, even the coaches getting back in the groove of doing things. So I think the word is when you had such a long layoff and you have so many new faces, the word's patience. And I have very little of it, but actually this second week I've done a lot better in that area. So be patient, continue to coach the fundamentals, and what's been cool about this week, we're starting to take things to the next level. We're starting to refine some of the things we taught in week 1.
So we will check back in next week to see if patience is still paying off for you, Coach. Meanwhile, you've seen the big controversy. Dylan Moses for Alabama saying that Lane Kiffin had their signals last Saturday. Nick Saban said he's not sure, but they had an answer for so many things. I want you to tell me a lot of things here. Lane Kiffin said we go way too fast to steal signals, and you see it right here. Is that the case?
Oh, well, in these particular instances, you don't have time to steal signals. Ole Miss plays a lot like the same type of tempo that we do at Samford. And to be honest with you, I call the plays and I call them as fast as I can. I don't care what you're lining up on defense. And the series that we're watching here on the screen now, you can tell that. I mean, you can see Alabama guys running in and out. In fact, right here, they actually had too many men on the field. I don't think this was a case of stealing signals. I would just think this was a case Alabama not lining up quick enough in the right defenses that were called.
Nick Saban said stealing signals is just part of the game. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm sure a lot of people do that. At Samford being a good Christian Baptist school, we would never partake in anything like that.
I got you.
But I think, you probably wouldn't hear as much about this controversy other than that, Coach Kiffin and Coach Saban work together. And I'm sure that Lane knows the signals, and I'm sure at some point in the game they probably may have got one or two that helped them run a play, but it looks like in all the plays we've seen, it's just a matter of tempo and Alabama not lining up fast enough to the particular sets Ole Miss was running.
Lane Kiffin was there for 3 years, but that was 4 years ago, 2016. What are the odds the signals are the same?
I would imagine, as successful as Coach Saban's been, that they probably haven't changed a lot.
Okay, wow.
And again, that's just me saying that. I don't know that for a fact, but I'd imagine a few have. Some of them probably haven't. But again, you have 40 seconds from once the ball's dead the previous play, okay? Think about this. You have 40 seconds, so you got to wait. If you're stealing signals, you got to look over there, and you got to wait for the defense to make their call, okay? They could be slow, they could be fast. Then you got to decipher that call, and then you got to call your play and get the right people on the field and snap the ball within 40 seconds. So it sounds a lot easier than it really is.
What's the fine line between, I know coaches don't want to throw their players under the bus. You think you have the right scheme, and you think it's execution. What do you tell everybody out there, not your team, what do you tell everybody out there that needs to be fixed when you know it's not a scheme issue, it's a tackling issue or something else like that?
Well, first of all, I always have a rule that I learned a long time ago that, when the team, when we win a ball game, it's the players. And if we get beat, it's the coaches. And I think that you have to take that into consideration at the end of of the day. And each Monday, whether we win or come up a little bit short, we discuss it with the players. Okay, these are things we need to improve on, and these are things that you need to be a little more accountable for, even though I'm going to take the blame in public. But we all understand you got to get better in these areas if you want to be successful.
Nick Saban has a lot to work on. All those touchdowns that Ole Miss scored last week, a very different system with Georgia today, but you know the team going to try to learn from that lesson against Ole Miss. We'll be right back after this.
You're watching CBS 42 College Football Saturday pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Let's go to our CBS 42 high school game of the week last night. Pinson Valley, Clay Chalkville. These two teams have combined for a ton of state titles. Playmakers everywhere. Tons of guys with college offers, including the quarterback right there, Zach Pyron from Pinson. How about the one-handed catch for Kenji Christian? And then turns on the Jets all the way for the touchdown. Pinson runs away just like Christian does there. 21-10 final score. Indians bounce back. They are 6-2 on the season. Now, one of those two losses came in the season opener against Hewitt-Trussville. Pinson actually outscored by one player on the Huskies himself. It's running back Armani Goodwin, one of the best players in our area, a four-star recruit with 5-star manners.
Yes, up, yes, up, yes, up, yes, up, yes, up, yes, up.
Armani Goodwin is very polite, unless you're in his way.
I like downhill runs. I don't like kind of stuff. I like just take it and go.
There's a secret ingredient to Goodwin's compact frame.
I always go to Sonic and give me like they call it our money special. I always get like 4 corn dogs and a small Powerade slushie. I always get that. I usually like get a hoodie and have the corn dogs right here, pull it out while I'm riding bikes and eat it.
It's working for him. Armani is one of the top recruits in the state for the class of 2021. Next year, he's headed to Auburn.
They're one of the guys that can take it to the house and take it the distance at any play, and I think that's one thing that Armani does. And you know, he's a threat to score from anywhere on the field.
He was really special when he showed up. The speed was already there, the talent was already there. It was just a matter of him going out and doing it every Friday night and being consistent about it.
That's led to a pile of offers, including one from Alabama. But Armani comes from a family of Auburn fans, and they love his future running backs coach.
My mom, they knew who Cadillac was, like, it's back in the old days. Yeah, I ain't really know. They were like, go look him up, go look him up. I was like, all right. I looked him up. They were like, he was fire. He said, I remind him, like, him.
A mini Cadillac on the way? That'll get Auburn fans excited. But right now, Armani is focused on his senior season.
Yeah, I don't like all that like attention and stuff. I just be playing football.
Well, that'll make you feel old, right? A high schooler doesn't know who Cadillac Williams is these days. But even though Armani Goodwin is going to Auburn, and both of these two guys who coached Georgia and Alabama missed out on him, Kirby Smart and Nick Saban, still two of the best recruiters in the SEC. Our very own Simone Eli went one-on-one with a guy who knows as much about Alabama recruiting as anyone.
All right, guys, we're super excited to welcome our guest, Andrew Bone, to the show today. Andrew, the senior recruiting reporter for BamaInsider.com, which is with Rivals, and a newly published author. So excited about this book. I've had a chance to go through parts of it. Andrew, we're excited to have you on. How's life, man?
Life's been good. Life's been real good. How are you, Simone?
Doing well, man. Hanging on there. You know, before we start talking about the book, I want to get your thoughts on this game, Alabama, Georgia. So much history with this rivalry recently. What do you think about this matchup, man?
Well, it's a heavyweight matchup. You know, it's a game that a lot of people have been waiting to see, for months. And, I think Alabama certainly has, one of the best offenses that we've seen in quite a while, even without Tua. I mean, they're just rolling on the offense side of the ball. And, with Georgia, their defense is, really gelling together, really humming. And, it's going to be a great game.
You know this program, and not just this season, but going just so many years back with what you have done through and through, inspired you to write this book, The Road to Bama. Talk to me a little bit about why you wanted to write this book and what is inside of it.
Well, I was very fortunate. Triumph Books, which is based out of Chicago, it was kind of their idea about writing the book, and fortunately they reached out to me about writing the book on Alabama, and really wasn't sure how to go about it because obviously I've known a lot of recruits through the years, and know a lot of players. I've covered high school football recruiting for 18 years, but this went all the way back into the Bear Bryant years. It's 18 former players, former Alabama greats. I mean, every single person that's listed in this book, I mean, Alabama fans know who they are. I want them to know, not only about their life at the University of Alabama or in the pros, but, know about these guys growing up and, really kind of, dug deep into, what led them to choose Alabama and talking to, parents and assistant coaches and high school coaches and mentors. There's so many different people that were connected to these guys throughout their entire lives. So we really kind of dug deep into their lives growing up, why they ended up playing football, what got them into becoming a star recruit, and what ultimately led them to choosing Alabama. So there's so many great interesting stories throughout.
Was there a specific story or a certain player where maybe his story stuck out in your mind, a story that you haven't heard yet?
Yeah, I think every single person in the book, every single story is different. Now, there's some that were similar, but a lot of guys, had different stories, had different upbringings, and had different lives. And talking to Cornelius Bennett, one of the best linebackers of all time at the University of Alabama and in the NFL, talking to him about his recruitment and knowing that he was actually committed to Auburn for a very long time. Was privately committed to Auburn, ended up flipping, and Auburn actually recruited him. Pat Dye recruited him to play running back alongside Bo Jackson. So that would have been a scary combination in the backfield with Bo Jackson and Cornelius Bennett. So hearing about that, because we hear about all these kids that flip these days, because there's so many guys that even in the book, T.J. Yeldon, that was a guy who was a big flip for Alabama from Auburn. So hearing some of these old school guys, even flips were happening back then.
All right, how can folks get their hands on this book, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can go to Amazon, which may be the easiest way for a lot of people. You can go to Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. All those websites have copies of the book available for purchase. And you can also go to Triumph Books, which is my publisher. You can go to their website and order the book directly from them.
Awesome. Andrew Bone with Rivals, author to an incredible, great book for fans, especially Alabama fans. We appreciate your time, Andrew, and thank you so much, man. Roll Tide.
Thank you very much, Simone. Roll Tide.
All right, thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Simone. Alabama will take all the top recruits they can get on defense right now. What is usually the Tide's bread and butter has been downright dismal early this season. Of the 76 FBS teams that have played a game, Alabama is 65th in total defense and 70th in pass defense. The Tide are 11th in the SEC in both of those categories. One guy who can maybe help Alabama turn things around on that side of the ball, outside of Nick Saban, is Dylan Moses. He's essentially the glue that holds the Alabama D together. 27 total tackles on the season. Georgia's going to come right at him. Bulldogs second in the SEC in rushing attempts this year. The Tide tonight need Dylan Moses to stand tall. Well, coming up next in our pregame show, fans in T-Town get a chance to snap selfies with the Amway National Championship trophy, the Crystal Ball. We asked them about tonight's matchup at Bryant-Denny. That's coming up next on our pregame show.
You're watching CBS 42 College Football Saturday pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Anybody who calls themselves a die-hard Alabama fan knows Nick Saban's won 6 national titles. That means he's hoisted 6 Amway College Football National Championship trophies, and that baby was on full display at the Bryant Museum this afternoon. Fans snapping pictures and even a special guest appearance from John Parker Wilson.
And hopefully it's here after the season to stay also.
Yeah, it feels amazing. I didn't expect it, so it was a great surprise, and excited to go see the museum and learn the history of Alabama and the football.
It was a absolutely great surprise. To be that close to a piece of history and also to one of the guys that played quarterback for Alabama is awesome.
Yeah, it's fun. I love coming out here and being able to socially distance, taking photos and meeting people these days.
It's the biggest game of the year. I mean, I think it's the playoffs in a sense, right? Like, I feel like they're going to have an opportunity to to win and set a statement, and looks like the coach is going to be there, so totally excited.
It's big, you know. Coach Saban 21-0 versus former assistants now with Kirby and what he's done with the Georgia program and got it going, and just, I mean, two powerhouses meeting. It's going to be a fun game.
Roll Tide. 31-17.
We know fans love taking photos with trophies. We also know they love overreacting on Twitter. We're going to reach into the Twitter mailbag coming up next. Can you imagine what we have to talk about with all this Nick Saban news? We'll be right back.
You're watching CBS 42 College Football Saturday pregame, presented by Pepsi.
He got corona?
Yeah, he tested positive this afternoon.
How the players don't test corona, but he got corona?
Universal reaction from everybody in Tuscaloosa on Wednesday night. And you know what we got to do, Drew? We got to make that guy a meme or a GIF, whatever the kids call it these days.
Or we got to get him in the Bee Gees. I mean, how about that falsetto on that reaction to the coronavirus news?
Can you imagine what everybody was thinking about their head coach not coaching in the biggest game of the year? But you know what the one positive would have been if Nick Saban was not coaching in this game tonight? Imagine having a video camera on the coach watching the game in progress, him going completely insane.
Yeah, just do one of those mega cast things. And as we go to our Twitter mailbag of the week here, Chad in Birmingham says, I say a live stream pay-per-view of Saban watching the game in real time. I mean, Chris, if we put that here on CBS 42, I think we'd be making hand over fist money.
So I think there's no way any coach, including Nick Saban, would be sitting down on a couch. He'd be right in front of the TV. He's pacing back and forth. He's yelling at the TV. Remotes might be thrown at the TV. Miss Terry probably got to go to Costco and get him a new 65-inch plasma because he broke the one he had.
Right.
It'd be a mess.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear what Saban has to say about the announcers. You know, a lot of Alabama fans get mad at the announcers already, but how about the head coach? Do you think he'd put his own subtitles on there, say that's actually not true as I throw my pen here? That's what Saban would be doing. If he watched the game at home, he'd be so angry he'd be throwing stuff, and Miss Terry would have no idea what to do.
A lesser athlete wouldn't have caught that pen.
Yeah.
Saban, I was really hoping he'd watch our pregame show. I was kind of bummed about that. He would have nothing to do 90 minutes out because the rule would have been that the coach could not communicate 90 minutes out. Our show started at 5 o'clock. Would have been great timing. And it's been a really good timing for Mac Jones to come in and fill in for Tua Tagovailoa. We're not going to say he's completely forgotten. But Mac Jones is doing everything to win games for Alabama, and they've needed to with his defense, and now he's getting some looks.
Yeah, and Mac Jones, people on Twitter are recognizing just how good he's been. Rio says if Mac shines against that vaunted Georgia defense, Chris, he'll have to be considered the leader for the Heisman. What do you say?
Mac Jones is not going to have the all-time stats. He's not Trevor Lawrence. He's not Tua, all the ridiculous records he broke for Alabama the last 2 years. None of that matters because what does matter? The best player on the best team. And Mac Jones is the face of the team. He is going to be a Heisman contender as long as Alabama is undefeated. If they win this game tonight, he's definitely in the top 5. Is he Trevor Lawrence? I would probably say no, not right now. But if he has big games, he could potentially be up there with him.
Yeah, and I kind of disagree with something you said there about the stats for Mac Jones. So far, statistically, he's the best quarterback in America, efficiency-wise. His passer rating, which granted, I have no idea.
I'm going by yards and touchdowns, the juicy stuff that Kyler Murray and Tua and Lamar Jackson, all those guys.
That's totally fair, but why was Tua so good? It was because of the pure efficiency. His passer rating, which again, I don't know how that's calculated, but his efficiency was slightly above 200. Even in his best season in Tuscaloosa, Mac right now is at a 220. He's been amazing this year.
Tua was about to set a record for passing efficiency, and Mac Jones, depending on how he does the next 7 games, could do exactly that. All right, time for a break here on the pregame show. We're going to go inside the SEC coming up next because we have a lot to discuss about what's going on with games being postponed this week and schedules being changed everywhere. Is this season dying a slow death? That might be dramatic, but we'll talk about it next.
You're watching CBS 42 College Football Saturday pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Well, this is the first week the SEC has seen a serious issue with COVID-19 outbreaks on teams. Florida had an issue. Their game with LSU postponed to December 12th. And Vanderbilt and Missouri both had issues. They are going to postpone their game from today to December 12th. It makes you wonder, is the SEC season in trouble? Is it slowly going away week by week? Time now to go inside the SEC. We certainly live in a world where you react and maybe overreact to all these things that happen. Matt Zenitz, Jason Caldwell back with Inside the SEC. Matt, is it a situation where we're overreacting? Is this season dying a slow death, or was this expected for everybody across the entire country?
I mean, this is 2020. Unfortunately, this is kind of what was expected, not only from a college standpoint, but you're seeing issues at the next level in terms of the NFL also. So I don't think if you talk to any administrators around college football or specifically the SEC, that you would have heard from anyone that expected to get through the season without any sort of issues. And unfortunately, this week, you're seeing some of those issues start to pop up. But again, this was not something that was unexpected by any means. It's just a matter of being flexible. It's probably the key word of 2020, flexibility. And they have themselves in position where the games that were postponed this week have tentatively rescheduled for a week that was open the weekend of December 12th. And hopefully moving forward, we'll see less of these issues popping up that have to be dealt with.
When you look at it logistically, Jason, this week's a good example, because what if Florida and LSU both have an issue next week and Missouri has an issue next week? That then means their game the following week gets impacted, and that December 12th date is only a one-time thing. Is it a slippery slope where we're seeing teams having to postpone games? Are they going to get to a point where it says, okay, we can't play one or two of these games?
I think it could. I think the thing you can always do is you can always juggle the schedule, because you're not impacting a ton of fans. It's not like you have travel plans juggle. You can change things around fairly quickly this year, much more so than you have in the past. So I think there's the ability to move games around, to change some things if you need to. You have a couple of open dates for these teams where you can juggle some things, but I think if you have to, move some games to make it more likely where you can get 9 or 10 games in, I think that's a possibility.
Let's say a worst case scenario here, guys, that one team plays 8 games, another team plays 10 games. Is the SEC going to have an issue with that? Obviously, going to Atlanta for the championship makes that a struggle. But would it be a big deal if one team played 8 and another team played 7 or 9 or 10?
You're dealing with unique circumstances, and I think one of the keys with this year, you just have to find a way to make it work. And I think in that situation, that's what the SEC would focus on doing. Whether if we reach that point, having to focus on something like winning percentages as opposed to just outright wins, losses, or whatever, I think that they'd be capable of finding a way to make it work. But again, hopefully we don't reach that point where that's even a discussion, but it's not like that would be totally unexpected or out of nowhere if it is something that has to be dealt with.
Yeah, I agree. I think you do what you got to do. If it means playing 8, playing 9, however many, you try to get in as much as you can get in, as many games as you can get in as safely as possible, and then see what happens at the end. But I think this year you just have to do what you got to do.
And we've already seen teams playing games without a head coach on the sideline, pretty much something other than health concerns and very, very small sample sizes over the last couple of years. We don't see that in college football. Of course, Nick Saban had his whole dilemma this entire week. For a team, if they weren't going to have a head coach in general on their field, Matt, is it a big deal, or could a coordinator come on there and they don't miss a beat? What do you think the players feel about that?
I mean, unfortunately, it's something that comes along with 2020. So you have different expectations of just what's normal and a possibility this year compared to most years. But for every team around the country, whether it's Florida State that's dealt with this type of situation or a team like Alabama that's gone through it this week, teams have put themselves in position where they know the route they'll go if something pops up like that with the head coach. And obviously, if something like that does happen, it's helpful to have people on your staff that already have head coach experience. And aren't going into running an organization without that kind of experience already. So like with an Alabama, for example, they have Steve Sarkisian on staff, who Coach Saban had identified as somebody that would be capable and that he would be confident in to handle things at the complex and oversee operations when he was out.
Well, you also have the College Football Playoff Committee, who is always full of so much drama. This team had this guy hurt. This team didn't play well this week. What if we have a situation where some of these teams don't have a head coach, and then the College Football Playoff Committee, Jason, has to put that into account? It just makes it even more of a mess, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, we were talking about flexibility. Who knows what's going to happen when that day, and if that day comes, when you start talking about playoff possibilities. You're going to have different numbers of games involved for teams, players, games where key players were missing. Maybe you're missing your core. Who knows? There's going to be so much thrown in there that I think they're just going to have to almost wash their hands, go, hey, here's who we think the 4 best teams are, and go with it, because I don't know how you're going to even things out in this season.
Hey, Jason Caldwell, 24/7 Sports, MattZennitzAL.com. Another week, guys. We enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you next week after this big matchup of Alabama and Georgia.
Sounds good, Chris.
Thank you.
And if you want to see the full interview with Matt and Jason, go to our website, CBS42.com, click on sports. So many more topics that we got to that we couldn't get in this broadcast. We'll be right back after this.
You're watching CBS 42 College Football Saturday pregame, presented by Pepsi.
1 hour to kickoff between Alabama and Georgia, and something's got to give when the Crimson Tide have the football, especially when they try to keep it on the ground. The numbers on Georgia's run defense are honestly hilarious. 1.49 yards per carry, 38 yards per game, 0 touchdowns this year. Now, last week, Bama's ground game woke up in a big way at Ole Miss, 200-plus yards, 5 touchdowns for Najee Harris. Kirby Smart says the play in the trenches could determine tonight's outcome.
They got weight classes in boxing, and there's a reason. If a guy's a heavyweight and he keeps hitting a lightweight, eventually the heavyweight will knock the lightweight out. And you got to have enough big guys across the line of scrimmage to withstand that. And, you know, we feel like we're in a much better position now than we have been in terms of depth, but we don't have guys across the defensive line as big as their offensive linemen.
The strength-on-strength matchup tonight with Alabama and Georgia is Crimson Tide offense versus Bulldogs defense. But offensively, UGA has turned to a guy who's turned out to be a savior for UGA, and it's Stetson Bennett IV. Now, to get some more information on this unsung hero for UGA, I talked with a guy who covers the team. It's Rex Castillo, sports director at WRBL, our sister station in Columbus, Georgia, and I had to start by asking him about the former walk-on.
So Stetson Bennett has been a long-time backup. He was a walk-on. And when you look at him, he's not Jake Fromm. He's not Jacob Eason. He's not Tua. This dude looks like he walked into the pro shop, bought a jersey, and somehow ended up on the field. But I have to tell you guys, this is a kid who's a gamer. If you watched against Tennessee, he's calm, cool, collected. He dove for the pylon to get a touchdown, so the team loves him. He's been in the system for a while, and when you think about it, he's also competed against a lot of talent in that quarterback room. Think about Jamie Newman and JT Daniels, who transferred in from USC. But before those guys, he was in the same quarterback room as Jake Fromm and Justin Fields, both highly recruited here in Georgia, and then Jacob Eason as well. So he's been around dudes. He knows how to compete. He's always been the guy, like, if you're a Georgia fan, you know who, like, the 5th or 6th redshirt freshman quarterback is. He is one of those guys, but he's proven to everyone that while he's put in the work, he was an overnight success that was years in the making.
Rex, last year, and I think a lot of Georgia fans are probably thinking this way, their defense was amazing for the entire season until they got to Atlanta. They played LSU. Alabama might be the best offense in the SEC this year, maybe in the entire country. Do you think Georgia's ready for that test?
They need to be. They really need to be. Now, in Atlanta, Joe Burrow was just on another planet compared to everybody else. And Joe Brady's absolute offense was just incredible. And that's why he's in the NFL right now. Why both of those guys in the NFL right now with a lot of other people. The thing about Georgia's defense, they're going to have to rely on their offense to carry a lot of that weight. When you have guys like Zeus, you need to control the clock, because now Alabama is going to still be this team that has 3 wideouts that make everything happen in 2 plays or less. Again, Jalen Waddle, the best way to stop Jalen, keep him on the sideline. Be old school Georgia, run the clock, control the clock. and that's how you have the best chance at Tuscaloosa.
Obviously in Alabama, all eyes are on this game. How about in Georgia? What's the vibe? Is everyone talking about the Bulldogs, and you think people are fairly confident that they might win this game?
The life of a Georgia fan is cautiously optimistic because, again, I work with Jack Patterson, and he's told me just the absolute heartbreak that Georgia fans have gone through, not only 2nd and 26, 28-3, what may or may not happen with the Braves. They're just cautiously optimistic. Oh, dude, it is an insane list of heartbreaks that all Atlanta and Georgia fans have to go through. So I will say that they look at this game as the ultimate test. It's the SEC championship before the actual SEC championship. If they can go 4-0 this week, I don't know how you don't talk about a college football playoff without the Georgia Bulldogs. Because, again, even though Coach Saban may be coaching from Zoom or may pull a Hugh Freeze and coach from a certain office in Bryant-Denny Stadium, they're going to count it as a win. So this game has to be the must-win game of the season, even though both teams are undefeated. You win here, you will put yourself in a great spot to control your destiny and compete for a national championship.
All right, our thanks to Rex Castillo. And by the way, the Braves are losing right now. Now, for the most part, Kirby Smart has come out on the right end against Georgia's biggest rivals. He's only lost once each to Auburn, Florida, Tennessee, and Georgia Tech in his 5 seasons. But check out that Alabama column. 0 wins. You know, the pressure is on Smart tonight to prove Nick Saban and Alabama are not in his head. Well, we know that this rivalry has provided a lot of awesome moments between Georgia and Alabama. Let's take a look back at the history.
Two versus 3. It's Alabama versus Georgia. They realize what's at stake.
And here it is. Tua Tagovailoa, a true freshman from Hawaii. Tagovailoa dancing around, circling back, dropped! A disastrous first down play. Make up for it, fires to the end zone, touchdown! Alabama wins!
Playing against an outstanding Georgia team, you know, probably one of the best teams in the country. Kirby's done an outstanding job there.
The Crimson Tide will not be denied.
And that means Jalen Hurts, a guy who won all but 2 of the games that he started. Hit him hard. Throws on the run. Touchdown, Judy.
I mean, the magnitude of every game, as you well know, Seth, is just it's huge. It's the next game. Obviously, the magnitude of those last 2, we all know what they were and what they were for. So I can't weigh the magnitude of them. It's hard for me to compare those things.
The 16 quarterback draw, Jalen Hurts. Touchdown.
Not a lot of weaknesses in this team. It's going to be really challenging for us to be able to execute the way we need to execute to be able to be successful in this game.
2 old friends embrace out at midfield.
Cannot wait. Just about an hour away from kickoff between Alabama and Georgia. Elsewhere in the SEC, Tennessee gets smacked at home against Kentucky. Highlights coming up next.
You're watching CBS 42 College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
This is the first time all year we've gotten to show you this shot live on the field. Alabama players warming up pregame. You know, because of COVID-19 restrictions, Alabama is letting one local affiliate for the TV stations shoot on the field. We got the Alabama-Georgia game. We're very happy to do it. Mac Jones is clearly ready to go. He's been in plenty of big-time games, and he's hoping that he can be the leader of this Alabama team as they make a stride for the playoff this year. And just to play a little fun game, if the playoff were to start right now after 4 weeks, it's not, thankfully, this is what it would look like. Clearly, Clemson's the top dog. They've been that way for a long time. And you got some unusual suspects on this list.
Yeah, North Carolina. When
Yeah.
was the last time we saw the Tar Heels in football up here? And then of course, Notre Dame, but it feels like we play this song every year. Notre Dame starts really hot. They look pretty bad today against Louisville. Carolina seems pretty fraudulent to me, Chris. If you think Ohio State, after they play a game, is still in 6, you're insane.
Yeah, Notre Dame scored 12 points in a win over Louisville today, and Ohio State, they're going to move up, and their first game is going to be next week. Trevor Lawrence is the star for Clemson. He's the reason why they're #1 in the country. And his stats today are just like every other game. 404 yards passing, 5 touchdowns. Almost all of that was in the first half, and poor Georgia Tech.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. And that graphic we have up right there, Chris, it's just too easy. It's very accurate. I mean, the guy's numbers are insane. In the first half today, I believe it was 391 and 5. So we had 13 passing yards in the second half, still had more than 400 yards.
And we're not joking when we say this team could put up 100 points if Trevor Lawrence was throwing the football like he wants to. And if Dabo didn't have any mercy, he's a nice guy. He's going to take it easy on some of these teams, and he should. We have no idea when Clemson will face a test, and we have no idea in the SEC who's really a contender and who's a pretender, because it seems like outside of Alabama and Georgia, everybody's beating each other, and none was more Exhibit A than Tennessee in the disaster of Jared Garantano today against Kentucky.
Yeah, a couple of pick sixes, Chris, in the first half there. And you're never going to win if you give up pick sixes, but it wasn't just those plays. It was an utter domination from the jump for Kentucky.
This was back-to-back pick sixes for Garantano. Kentucky got up 14-0, and it was basically all they needed. And this is a Tennessee team that had 0 turnovers the first 10 quarters, 2.5 games. They had 3 in the second half against Georgia, a game they felt like they should have won early. And ugly here, they had 3 more today. Kentucky wins 34-7. Who knows about the SEC East? In the SEC West, Texas A&M's coming off that big win over Florida. They have all the momentum. The Mike Leach boat's sinking. Is that safe to say?
How about the bandwagon? Remember that video they tweeted about hop on the wagon? They have not won since.
Well, when you have plays like this on special teams, it's not just the offense. Blocked punt there leads to a Texas A&M touchdown. And KJ Costello was so good against LSU. He got all this hype, and then he's been a train wreck since then.
Chris, he had 623 passing yards, an SEC record in 1 game against the reigning national champs. He's done nothing aside from turn the ball over ever since that game.
Texas A&M is coming into their own. They're on the road, and they made the Bulldogs pay 28-14. That game is about to end, and Texas A&M is about to get the victory. Ole Miss felt pretty good about their offense against Alabama last week. And Sam Pittman, Drew, we have been dogging this guy. What a terrible hire for Arkansas. Oh, no, that's my bad, because this team's actually pretty good.
I love what's happening right now in Fayetteville, Chris. I actually went out there to cover the game against Auburn last season. It was the most depressing environment I've ever seen. The team was awful. No one was in the stands. Now they've actually got some life.
Matt Corral gave them 7 points, but then turned right around and got them to a 1-score game late. But Arkansas, when's the last time the Hogs were tough late in the game? Probably the last time they played for an SEC title, 2006, something like that. Arkansas 33-21. Whoa, pig indeed. And they are looking to maybe challenge Alabama, challenge Auburn for second place. Who knows? Crazy things going on in the SEC. One thing that's not crazy, though, it's very consistent. The game of the week on CBS and Gary Danielson talking X's and O's about how Alabama can beat Georgia. It's coming up next. But first, we want to tell you who our Watch and Win winner is this week. It's Gary Keith from Helena. Log on to CBS42.com to see how you can play and what you can win each week online and what the word of the day is. We'll be right back.
You're watching CBS 42 College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
How about another live look on the field of the man who got promoted for about 36 hours at Alabama? Steve Sarkisian was going to be the head coach for the weekend. Instead, Nick Saban's back. And Gary Danielson from CBS Sports had a lot of opinions on that one.
And we're going old school, bringing him up on the old rotary dial-up phone here. Gary Danielson here on College Football Saturday. Gary, so much chaos this week. I know you've been talking with the program closely, socially distant, obviously. What can you tell me about how Alabama feels about preparing for a game with or without the coach?
Well, I wish I could just, give you some great words of wisdom here. I really don't. I can tell you what my experience as a player and being around this for a long time is. I don't have any inside information for you. I would give a lot of credence to the fact that you know, Coach Saban has been here for a long time. He's built a very strong program. There's a process that goes on. There's a order of practice. There's people are used to doing things in a certain way. And I'm sure all the way up till game time, besides having to do some interviews about Coach Saban testing positive and now the protocols going through, I don't think anything will change for the players. I don't think it's too well-oiled of a machine. But, you know, when your leader isn't out there for the game, I can't imagine that wouldn't have an effect on the game. Now, it does appear that still a great chance that Coach will be out there. We hope that for a couple reasons. One, we just want him healthy. And two, we want to see this game against the best against the best. And I'm sure even Georgia wants Coach Saban on the sideline.
So let's get into what you like to talk about, X's and O's. Is it easy to look at what Alabama did on defense last week against Ole Miss with the worst statistically performance in school history? Or is this so different of an offense that last week means nothing? Or is it in between?
I don't know for sure, but I have to say when I watched that game, my jaw was on the ground for most of the game. And it wasn't all just when Alabama got tired late in the game. You know, right from the beginning, they had trouble with the spread offense, the scrambling of Matt Corral. They seem to be off balance. They seem to be not tackling very well. There's so many theories as to why. It was raining all day. The field was slippery. But, you know, I've watched Alabama play for 15 years, and, you know, I haven't seen them play quite like that. So it's alarming. And I don't think there's any group in all of college football, though, that is more looking forward to playing a game than Alabama's defense is coming up against Georgia. Now, Georgia's a really good football team, and talent-wise, they're probably one of the 4 or 5 teams in the country that can line up with Alabama and play athlete to athlete. But you've got to believe this Alabama defense cannot wait to get out there and atone for the way they played last week. Now, the bigger picture, can Georgia do what Ole Miss did? Probably not. You know, there is a big question mark. Stetson Bennett, the quarterback for Georgia, his third start, his first big one in this thing. That probably is the biggest denominator out there, that the question mark that everybody doesn't know how he's going to handle this Alabama defense. But, boy, there's a lot of talent on this Georgia team, and I think their defense is ready to make some plays and keep them in the game right until the end.
And that Bennett thing might be the most underrated thing people in Alabama are looking at. Hey, Gary, thanks so much for being on with us here. We hope you guys have a good broadcast of Alabama and Georgia.
Thanks. My pleasure.
All right, our thanks to Gary Danielson, as always. And Week 4 of the SEC season has obviously hit some bumps in the road. We made it through the first 3 weeks pretty much scot-free as far as COVID-19 testing is concerned. Not really the case this week. For the first time all season, we've seen a couple of games postponed because of it. The big one, LSU Florida, tentatively moved to December 12th after the Gators saw a spike in positive cases this week. The Missouri-Vanderbilt game also postponed. Vandy did not have enough healthy scholarship players available to go forward with it. On Friday, the SEC announced schedule changes to accommodate those postponed games. We know one game that is still happening tonight. Kickoff in just about half an hour between Alabama and Georgia. Coming up next on our pregame show, our keys to the biggest game of the season. Don't go anywhere.
CBS 42 College Football Saturday pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Back live on the field, Najee Harris had the game of his life last week, and you know he's going to need it again against a staunch Georgia defense who's going to come right at them. It's going to be physical, and they cannot wait. What about the weather? What can fans expect tonight? Are they in the clear? For more on that, Chief Meteorologist Ashley Gann.
It's been a beautiful day in Tuscaloosa, lots of sunshine, temperatures close to 70, but it cools off quickly as the sun begins to set. 62 for that 7 o'clock kickoff. Temperatures, though, slipping into the 50s by halftime and through the final whistle. Clear skies, cool, and feeling like fall in Tuscaloosa tonight. Back to you guys.
Usually when we're talking Alabama, Georgia, both teams are always going to be on top of the charts in the SEC in offense and defense. But one concerning note for Alabama here, Georgia's got them beat almost everywhere on this list.
Right, and you take a look at total defense. That's where Georgia has been so good. But the offense has been sneakily strong as well under Stetson Bennett. Not a guy with a lot of pedigree, but they've been good on both sides of the ball.
Alabama probably wants a shootout. Georgia probably wants to struggle on defense, win it 21-17. Bama wants to score 35, 40 points. If they can do that, they'll probably get the win. As we look at our keys to the game for Alabama, obviously the defense has to wake up. You cannot be porous in the secondary or you're going to have a bad time.
They're hoping for an they are who we thought they were moment with Stetson Bennett and those 4 and 5 stars. Getting off the field on third down is going to be big for both teams as well.
Biggest play of the series is always going to be third down. And then the UGA defense, keep them guessing. Run it with Najee, Mac Jones rolling out. All these playmakers Alabama has. Najee will be a key factor for the Tide tonight. We want to thank you for watching our pregame show. We will see you right after the game for Nick Saban's live press conference, Alabama and Georgia, kicking off at 7 o'clock.